Hello, everybody. I am the Recordo voice, and I have something to tell you about your own voice. You hear it every time you speak or sing, and yet you don't know how it sounds to others. This is a scientific fact. Here at last is a way you can test your voice and hear it as it actually sounds to others. You know that personality is denoted by your voice. You can now find out what yours is like. Step up to this wonder machine and make a permanent record of your voice. It only takes a minute, and all it costs is sixpence. You can speak or sing up to 125 words in any language. And as soon as you have finished, your completed record is instantly delivered. On the side of this machine, there's a little gramophone on which you can play your record and listen to it with earphones.
Hello, this is Stephen Coates from the X-Ray Audio Project. We're on Soho Radio. We are here from the 12th to 25th of November. We have an installation. You can come and see it in the shop front on Great Wimble Street. Please come and have a look at it. It's strange. Now, if you're wondering what the X-Ray Audio Project is and you haven't heard the previous program in this series of 5, The Strange Story of Soviet Music on the Bone, I'll tell you, you might be thinking, what's somebody going on about X-rays for on the radio? Well, the X-Ray Audio Project is now a film, a book, a travelling exhibition, live event, and an installation here. Now, it is in fact a story, really. It's the story of an underground community of music lovers and bootleggers in the Soviet Union in the Cold War era who copied forbidden censored music onto X-ray film. They made their own records using their own recording machines to escape the censor. That's the story, and we have a series of programs around the themes of the story. This is the second one, and it's about the self-made record. And I'm here with my collaborator, Paul Hartfield, photographer.
Hiya.
And our special guest, Alan Dein, oral historian, broadcaster, writer, researcher, archivist, and of course I think probably the expert, certainly in the UK, on the self-made record. Hello, Alan.
Hello, Stephen. It's wonderful to be here. Am I an expert? I'm passionate, and I've been following and exploring the story of these discs. And you're absolutely right. What's so incredible about this area of music history is that really it dropped through the cracks of history. We don't know much about it. We are now still trying to find out exactly what went on, particularly in the non-commercial world of recording music.
Right, so if I said to you, what is a self-made record? I mean, I use that phrase self-made rather than homemade. Maybe you could just tell us what it is. We heard a little bit of an instruction there at the beginning from your collection, didn't we?
Yeah, that one is from the 1930s, and that was the beginning of what we'd call the coin-operated machine. So that really started in conjunction with the amusement and entertainment industry. Just like today we have photo booths, which we're all familiar with, getting a picture taken in a booth. In the old days, you could make a record in a booth. Actually, in the 1930s, they weren't booths. They looked more like a skyscraper, and you stood at it, and you weren't enclosed. You actually spoke into a microphone, and as the advert said, when your record popped out, you could actually listen to it. But really, the story goes much further back. It goes back to really the beginning of the gramophone industry. In those early days, there was a passion to actually find a way of presenting and recording the voice, because the voice was quite a spiritual and special thing. It represented the person's soul, and there was an idea of capturing that. And certainly, even before the music industry jumped onto the bandwagon, the early recordings were really about the voice and about sort of presenting the voice, recording the voice. And then by the early Edwardian times, the most interesting thing about it is that they were used for professional reasons. They were office tools. The idea of being able to work in a big office, record memos, letters, and have secretaries write them up. And of course, the only way to do that was find a machine that could do that. So it was a very specialist tool. And really what happens is that period between the early 20th century and the 1930s is how to democratize the voice. Because in the early days, most recordings were made professionally. either in a studio like the one we're in now, or at home in very expensive personal recording kits, either on cylinder or later on gramophone records, and only a few people could afford to buy that kind of equipment. So what happens in the 1930s, and why these 1930s discs are so lovely, it's the first time we really hear ordinary people's voices on disc.
Amazing. And the connection with the X-Ray Audio Project from our point of view is that the Soviet bootleggers, they also bootlegged this technology, the technology which is used to make your own record in real time, unlike pressing a record, which is the usual way of in the mass production in the recording industry. They got hold of a machine similar to the ones you're talking about. It was actually probably used by a journalist. It was a German machine. And they managed to copy it, to hack it effectively. So that's really the connection for us, is that all these X-ray records, they're all made in real time. They all sound slightly different than each other. They obviously look different than each other because they're cut on X-rays. But it's the same technology, isn't it?
It is the same technology, or it becomes the same technology. What is so intriguing about the early years is there was so much experimentation. So the very early discs that I've come across are actually not discs as we know it today. They're more like postcards. And they were created by the French at the beginning of the 20th century. And the idea is you had a little kit. And it was a postcard with a disc on it, and you would cut the disc with a little machine at a horn, and you would record into the horn. You would speak into the horn, it would record your voice onto the disc, and then you would send that postcard to a friend or a relative, a lover, or whatever. And this idea was the beginning, in a way, of saying, how can we actually sort of harness the voice and pass your message on like a letter, a spoken letter? And unfortunately, the difficulty is that technology was very, very clunky. It didn't work. It didn't take off. It lasted a couple of years, and it sort of fell into the abyss. And so, really, what happens is through this period, more and more people are trying to find ways of exploring how to present this technique and be able to pass and send messages on. So of course it's very, very experimental. And in a way, what's so exciting about all of this is that the music industry, in a way, is all experimental. There were no rules. We were all learning at this time, and even learning microphone technique, how to speak into a microphone, what to say into a microphone. Let's face it, cinema was still in its infancy. The spoken cinema doesn't even happen until the 1920s, late 20s, when you actually hear voices on the screen. So it's all very rough and ready, and I think that's really exciting. And so by the time in the mid-30s where these coin-operated discs come in, we've gone through lots of experimentation, and hey presto, they found a machine that works.
It's great. Well, I'm going to play another one from your collection here, which is, I think, probably is a journalist, Roger Wilmot, talking about the machine and trying to use one at the same time.
This recording is being made in a coin-operated automatic recording machine on Waterloo Station on the 17th of October 1969. The recording disc is made of a thin laminated plastic, slightly thinner than a normal commercial 45 RPM record. And the process normally used in these machines is an embossing system whereby the plastic is actually compressed to form the groove. Experiments have also been made in cutting on this type of plastic, and an example can be seen in one of Pete Copeland's message discs, recorded on the same kind of plastic but actually cut. The trouble, of course, with both systems is that the plastic is noisy, whether cut or embossed, and also, of course, an embossed groove is rather likely to... I do hope this is working, because it doesn't seem to be doing anything. An embossed groove is rather likely to become unembossed, so to speak, at the end of a long period of time. I don't think it's working at all. Well, we shall have to see. The rather primitive arrangements for indicating to you how long you've got to go is a wheel which rotates through a quarter of a turn, and so far it hasn't moved. Personally, I think I've put my half crown in and been done again.
Yeah, we actually do record X-Rays live from performances. We have quite a few months.
Is it working? I'm not sure. Yeah.
So, Paul, I mean, that's true, isn't it? It's not an easy business. I mean, they've got it as Alan said, they got it done professionally. This is 1969, so that's quite late on, isn't it? But it's not an easy business, is it?
It's not an easy business at all, and I go through that every time, without the accent, more swear words.
And for real nerds, I mean, that difference between cutting and embossing is just that, isn't it? Is that writing with a biro or something, isn't it, rather than actually cutting?
Yeah, prefer to cut. It's longer. Yeah, it lasts longer.
So, Alan, by this time it's entered popular culture rather than be for professional people or in the office context. And so these machines, these coin-operated machines, where were they? I mean, like, where did they appear?
The coin-operated machine had two massive phases. The first one was in the 30s, and they appeared in department stores. They would appear in ocean liners, and then within a year or two, from 1935 to about 1937-8, you would have found them at the end of piers, you would have found them at railway stations, anywhere where people congregated. And the idea was really to get people to stick in their sixpences and record a disc. It was very difficult because, of course, people were not prepared, didn't realise what they could do. They'd never spoken into a microphone before. And just the ability to be able to stand and talk for 30, 40 seconds and not know what to say, and to be able to kind of devise a kind of 40 seconds to a minute's worth of material was very difficult. So actually, what is so interesting is it's actually a snapshot of the way we present ourselves in front of a microphone. But what is so interesting is that the naturalistic ones, certainly the holiday ones, where people really don't care as much and they're just going for it because it's a novelty, they'll throw their sixpence into the slot and whatever happens, they're actually some of the best ones, because you get that kind of humanity, that the soul that the recordists, the recording engineers of the 19th, early 20th centuries were looking for, the soul of people. And I think that's what's so wonderful about these recordings. Going back to Roger Wilmot's recording for a second, Rogers gave me that disc when I was making a series many years ago for the BBC. Roger was also talking about another very well-known sound engineer called Peter Copeland. Well-known, he records lots of those BBC stereo discs that you could buy, you can still find around. And Peter ended up becoming the chief engineer at the British Library National Sound Archive. And he was a real phenomenon. He knew a lot about the recording and the history of music. And one of the things that Peter always said, that these records were elusive. We don't really, we never knew exactly how many were made. No one knows how many were produced. No one knows how many were kept. No one really knows very much about the kind of the machinery of the business, because all the documentation was destroyed. There's very little information at our fingertips, and I'm sure that's something you found as well when you're researching the X-ray discs. Is that you're going on whispers, hearsay, anything, and trying to gather the stories. And in a way, it's similar, even though this is not the cold block East, but this is Britain. And obviously we're specifically talking about Britain at the moment, but of course these discs became very popular around the world. Certainly the company that produced the voice discs, the aluminium little sixpenny discs, they were sold throughout the old empire, and you could make discs in pretty much in lots of different countries around the world. And of course, America had its own ideas and recorded their own types of discs, which we can go on and talk about a bit later. So actually, this technology was moving not only, that the experimentation was still going, but what is so interesting is that other countries around the world were doing their own thing with these kind of recordings.
Well, let's have a listen to another one from your collection, which I think is in Liverpool in a store. It was in a department store, I think, which was Lewis Stores, right?
Hello there, old-timers. You remember that idea of mine about making gramophone records instead of writing letters? Well, here's the first example now. I'm up in Liverpool now. Well, I'm in Lewis's shop, as a matter of fact. Very good shop indeed. And June has just made a record. I'm afraid there's not very much to hear on it because she went all silent again, as usual. Well, Gwen and her dad and June are off today on the Yoma. And I shall be sorry, I suppose, to see them go. Well, anyhow, it won't be many more days before I'm getting on board myself. As a matter of fact, I can't make this letter any longer. I'm beginning to feel the pangs of hunger, and I haven't had a drink of any sort. Not only today, but not even last night. so I think we'd better rectify that at once. Cheerio, people. This is letter number 1. Everything's all right. Cheerio.
The record you have just heard on the reverse side of this disc was made at one of Lewis's stores. 80 years ago, Lewis's started with a small shop of 26-foot frontage. And from this modest beginning, Lewis's have steadily grown to be the most outstanding retail distributing company of its kind in this country, probably in the world. Today there is a Lewis's in Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, Glasgow, Leicester and Hen.
I'm going to fade him out, but I mean that's interesting as well, Alan, isn't it? Because then it becomes a sort of a carrier for an advertisement, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and in fact, that was one of the ways that these machines could be placed in so many different locations throughout Britain. It was an expensive process. These machines were very solid, very beautifully constructed. They looked a little bit, as I said before, like 1930s skyscrapers, US skyscrapers. Very beautiful looking building, would have cost a lot to maintain. So the only way they could actually get sort of funding straight away is to create advertising. So what they did is the discs were two-sided. They look like a kind of conventional CD. They're silver looking, aluminium. But as you can hear, they play very well. The quality is excellent, and in fact, I would argue, far superior to what would come next in the 1960s with the famous Caliber discs, which were vinyl, and they were 45 RPM discs. These little aluminium discs were actually very good. The clarity was strong. You got about 45 seconds of audio on them. They were made in the machine, so they were embossed straight away in the machine, and they could pop out. You could play them. You still had to pay for them, so if you didn't like them, you still had to pay the money. But the important thing is you could listen to them straight away. And also the great thing about them, which is so interesting, is the fact that, this idea of democratizing the voice, the fact that they were available in so many places, and actually, ironically, that led to the downfall of the company. Because these discs you can still find them they're quite plentiful. A lot of people did them. A lot of people recorded on them. Difficulty is they didn't get enough sixpences, even though so many people use them, they just didn't get enough through the slot. They wouldn't pay for the machines. And by the end of the 30s, voice records were no longer.
Mm-hmm. Paul?
Were the advertising discs already recorded, or did they record each one as it went along, double-sided?
Good question. They were recorded beforehand. So they were all preloaded. They had a machine in Wembley. There was a big 1920s factory called the Hong Kong Works in Wembley, and this is where the company were based, amusement equipment company. And what they did is they produced lots and lots of discs, pre-recorded, and they were sent out to the specific locations where the recordings were made. So, for example, Lewis's in Liverpool, those discs, the advert was sent there. There's adverts for End of Piers in Southend and places like that. There's adverts for cigarettes. There's adverts for restaurants. So the adverts themselves are fascinating because they're a snapshot on the kind of commercial world of the time. But of course, that was exactly what they did. They were all pre-recorded.
So would it be the same guy? You'd hear the same voice advertising chocolate, advertising?
Lots of similar voices. You do notice about 2 or 3 voices, and there's a wonderful song which you may have or may not called "Make Mine a Miner," which was a cigarette, and it was actually the voice was we've discovered was a chap called Bobby Comber. And Bobby was a very well-known musical variety artist of the 30s, and obviously got a few bob on the side to do the adverts for voice records.
Excellent. Well, listen, just to go the opposite pole from the advertisement, I've got a little test here for Alan. Now, Alan, I would like you to tell us who this is. The clues I'm going to give you is that it was recorded on Oxford Street, not very far from here, but not in a department store, but in HMV, which also apparently had a recording machine in there. Let me play it and see if you can tell us who it is.
Intrigued.
Oh, so loose, very sargy go yard blata, elanu saha kelazod, so brazo do ray, eton was a gatisad, gira tam el pirati, das hoel quo kan ta hoaz of the nazod, od kumi mahe tan of the lohaz of the end.
I don't think we need to hear that much more of that. It goes on in that vein for some time. Any ideas, Alan?
Oh, The timbre of the voice, I recognise it. Stephen, any more little hints? Clues?
Well, he was infamous, put it that way, rather than famous.
Right.
Became, in fact, one of the most infamous people in the country, and was known colloquially, well, you wouldn't guess it from that voice, as the Beast, or the Great Beast, in fact. Drawing a blank there. Okay. Okay, well, it's actually Alistair Crowley.
Oh,
how interesting.
And he recorded that in the HMV store in the 1930s. It was
Yes.
wrongly attributed as being recorded on wax cylinder, but in fact actually he recorded a series of recordings on disc, and that is him reciting the language of the angels, apparently.
It's fascinating the fact that so many people like Crowley, who were kind of connected to the arts, literature, music, did make these kind of recordings, because even they were fascinated in what their voice sounds like back to them, because most people don't know what we actually sound like, and it was the first time. And a lot of people didn't record professionally, but were well known in their own fields, like Crowley, of course. So that's very interesting. But of course, going back to the kind of, in a way, what the voice meant, and this idea of the voice as a spirit, and also a lot of the early recordings, there was an idea that you could record the dead, the past, and there's the idea that you could lift the spirits out of the ground in a way through actually sort of capture. A microphone could capture something that we can't hear. All of these ideas were kicking around the 19th century, and kicking around the idea of what the possibilities were of actually capturing sound. So it's intriguing and coincidental that it is, of course, Crowley, and it's so interesting that a lot of people did use these recordings, and of course, another commercial avenue for the new recording industry, the fledgling industry, was not only the shops would sell records, but they would offer a facility to record your own voice, and particularly musicians took it up. And even they had studios where they had a piano, or they had a couple of instruments available, or an area where you could go in with your band and record your one-of-one disc. So that became another popular area, as opposed to the coin-operated disc, which is much more rough and ready.
And that's a perfect segue, because actually we've got some more things from your collection here. I suspect these were recorded in the coin-operated things, but these are some songs. So this is Riley's song from the 1930s from your collection.
Someone waits for me. If only I could see her, how happy I would be. Where the blues of the night meet the dawn of the day, someone waits for me. Well, Tom, what do you think of that? The recording's like just about nearly going to finish, so I'll send you a letter when we get down to Australia. That'll be about 6 weeks' time, and I'll keep on writing continuously, say every week or so. And so I hope you get this safely and keep it till I get back home. I'll be home in about maybe anything from 18 months to 2 years out of that.
I mean, crikey, how much history is packed into that 1 minute? I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? I mean, beautifully sung.
Yeah.
I don't know if is it an Irish song or something? I'm not sure what it is, the folk tune, but he sounds like he's in Liverpool and he's going to heading off to Australia, emigrating or something. Is that what's going on there? Or?
Yeah, he said he's going to be back in a couple of years, so he's most probably got a job out there. And of course, it was the era of the sort of £10 poms. So many people left the industrial north and other places to start a new life in Australia. And these kind of discs would have been mementos. Maybe the last time you would have heard a voice. And of course, making a phone call from Australia back to England would have been just so phenomenally prohibitive as far as cost, that disc would have left people, the sound of that person's voice until they got back. And I think that was very important. And of course, singing was a natural. That was inevitable. That's what people were going to do in these booths, because, you could do it. And obviously people had songs in them, the popular song, the kind of the Irish song, the pub song. Obviously, the in this case, is obviously from Liverpool, where sort of one of the homes of songs. So I think that, as you said, it's packed with stuff, and I would say it's 1930s. I think it may be an aluminium disc. It most probably is a voice disc.
Amazing quality as well, isn't it?
Superb.
Superb quality. And also, as you were saying earlier, the power of the voice. It's like the soul of the person captured in a way that a letter never could. Because actually, it's got them in it, isn't it? It's all in there, isn't it? And he's trying to squeeze his message in and his song and it all together, and it's wonderful.
Totally, and also the fact that when he's talking afterwards, it is pretty naturalistic, and that's nice. It's not someone, a lot of people wrote down what they were going to say, and in fact, actually, that is important, because from the 1920s, when the BBC starts broadcasting, the way we would speak in a studio is we would have a prepared set of texts, so everything was read. There was very little naturalism. And that formality continued for many, many decades, actually. And so what is interesting is that when you hear people talking that in a kind of loose, relaxed way, it is unusual, and it is so rare. And so these are vital bits of social history, as you say. They are so important.
When do you think this kind of radio voice came in? Were people were running from a script? The looseness of that one is beautiful. You can feel their personality, but quite a few of them are read from a script. When did you think? Do you think that was an understanding that it was a radio voice, for want of a better phrase? Or?
Definitely. There was, shall we say, a received type of radio voice. And the reason why they do sound stilted is because they did exactly that. They imitated the presenters and the hosts of radio programs.
And so was the posh accent put on?
I think people did. People tried to transform their voice into how you should speak to a microphone. And in the old days, people addressed the microphone. If you went into a BBC studio, you weren't even allowed in without a tuxedo. The way we're dressed, we wouldn't even get it. We wouldn't get in through the doors. It was a very important. It was the pedestal of those people. The difference between those people who broadcast and people who had never broadcast was so high. It still is to a certain extent, but back then it was. And obviously, the democratization of these discs is very important, because it gives people a chance to kind of to speak and to capture their voices. But what you're saying is so important, that the idea of when we hear that disc, how natural it sounds. And also what is so nice about it is that when we listen to these recordings, we're listening to something so fleeting. It's that most people probably won't even remember what they did. It's just a second in their lives. It's just, and to capture like a photograph, it does offer a very, very unusual snapshot of history.
Let's have a listen to another one.
It's an Neverland with a Humpty Dumpty band playing oola, oola, oola. Everybody in the band in the Neverland playing oola, oola, oola. You can jump across a moonbeam, you can swing upon a star, you can even sit on my back shouting oola from above. It's a Neverland with a Humpty Dumpty band playing oola, oola, oola all for you. It's a Neverland with a Humpty Dumpty band playing oola, oola, oola. Everybody in the band in the Neverland playing oola, oola, oola. You can bang the big bass steeple, you can bang the big bass drum. You can be a piper and go rumty-tum-ty-tum. It's a Neverland with a Humpty Dumpty band playing oola, oola, oola all for you.
You can imagine that bringing a tear to Granny's eye, can't you?
It makes you want to clap, doesn't it?
Absolutely amazing. In terms of what you were saying, it's the kind of opposite, isn't it, of the sort of BBC radio voice. It's completely spontaneous and, right from the heart, right?
It's so sweet, and that disc was loaned to me by Stephanie, who obviously was now a woman, a mother, grandmother, and it was it was a beautiful recording. As you said, it feels very natural. It is different to the stuff that was recorded in the 30s, definitely post-war, 1950s, definitely recorded in a little studio. And it would have been one of many recordings that were done in shops, record shops, gramophone shops, music shops offered little studios where you could go and you would pay a little bit more. So, that would have been maybe $5 or something, or $10. It wouldn't have been cheap, because you would have had to have an operator recording it and so forth. You wouldn't have been able to just do it all yourself. Put a coin in and just press go.
And you can imagine that becoming a treasured part of the sort of family history. Well, she kept it, obviously, and gave it to you. And can you talk a little bit, Alan, about how you came across this? What was your route into it in the first place? I mean, you're an oral historian, but I mean, how did you develop this passion for it?
I think it became because of my work as an oral historian. The voice was essential, and capturing people talking. But like so many of us who are passionate about these discs, you stumble upon them. Whether it's in a car boot sale or charity shop. And I think the first one I found was in a charity shop. And I took it home, and of course, you knew, like everybody else does when they play it, this is unlike anything else that is produced commercially. It is a one-of-one disc. It's someone's life. Obviously, initially, it's kind of sad it ends up there. How did these things end up in charity shops? Why weren't they treasured like Stephanie's disc? Why didn't someone hold on to it? Who knows what happens? Often it ends up in those days, and when I started to collect them in the 1980s, they ended up in people's vinyl collections when they were chucking them out when the CD revolution was happening. They just got lost in the record collection, and as they binned or dumped the whole record collection, out went some of these discs. And so a lot of the discs that were found subsequently, unfortunately, didn't have the provenance. They just found voices, like found photographs. Very fascinating, and we love to look at found photographs, and we're intrigued by them. But there's nothing like having the story, because obviously we can make our own story when we hear a voice and we look at a photograph. But when you actually hear someone talking about that record, and obviously the social history around that record, there's nothing else like it. So what I did when I first started to kind of really dive into these records and trying to find a way of understanding them, I put an advert in the Radio Times. And this was in the 1990s when you could do that kind of thing, and said, does anyone have these discs? And people sent them in. And this was at the BBC. And they sent them in originals, which was amazing. Some people dubbed them off onto cassette or reel-to-reel. But it's amazing how many people sent the original. And obviously what I was doing was I was dubbing them all off, digitizing them, and then sending back their originals. And then made a series of radio programs about them. But what was wonderful, of course, is that they had the provenance. They could tell me about the disc, and they can sort of connect up those voices, and particularly the poignancy of hearing voices that are no longer with us.
Do you discover any sort of set that you could trace the path of the family's history? Or?
It's a very fascinating question, because actually I did, but not with these kind of discs, but with cylinders. Oh. There was a family in New Southgate, a quite well-off family, who in the early 1900s recorded themselves every Christmas over a period of 20 years when the families got together, and kept these recordings up. And they're all now in the Museum of London, these discs. And it's another story, these cylinders. But that was the only time I actually know of, as you say, a kind of a collection over a period of time. There's lots of sets where people make lots of them, because, of course, one of the things we notice when we listen to them is how short they are. So, of course, you've got to put a lot of sixpences, or a lot of 2 and 6s into the slot to say something substantial. So there are sets of 5, 10 discs where people haven't finished off their story or haven't finished off reading something. So you do find those quite often. And sometimes you find them and there's a couple missing. It's obvious that, what's happened to it. They've heard it and didn't like it. Intriguing.
I want to play another tune, actually. Here we go.
Lullaby of Birdland, that's what I always hear when you sigh. Never in my wordland could there be ways to reveal in a phrase how I feel, Have you ever heard two turtle doves feel and prove when they love? That's the kind of magic music we make with our lips when we kiss. And there's a weepy old willow, he really knows how to cry. That's how I cry in my pillow. If you should tell me farewell and goodbye, lullaby of birdland, whisper low. Lullaby of birdland, how we'll go. Flying high in birdland, high in the sky above all. All because we're in love.
I love it. He's obviously a pretty good singer, right? And that would be another use for them, wouldn't he, if you were a good singer, or even you might even be a professional. Interestingly, I played that partly because yesterday we played Lullaby of Birdland on an X-Ray record, an Ella Fitzgerald, obviously a big tune at the time. And in the Soviet Union, Alan, there wouldn't be any way for a singer-songwriter or a non-professional musician to make a recording, because you had to be a member of the Composers Union to write lyrics, to be allowed to record your lyrics, and you had to be a member of the Musicians Union to be able to write and record a tune. And of course, becoming a member of the union would be subject to approval by the authorities. That was another way of controlling the whole thing. And so there wasn't really any other way for amateurs to record at that time in the Soviet Union apart from direct-to-disc on X-Ray. It must have been wonderful at this time. If you were a musician, you could just go into one of these booths and, you know, put your sixpence in, or later your 2 and 6, and make a recording of you, right?
So true. So true. And I think that this is common not only in the Eastern Bloc, where there were lots of added pressures, but certainly the early blues recordings that we find in the States, in the US, are often recorded on these kind of recordio machines or coin-operated machines, but certainly very cheap non-commercial recording equipment, because of course those musicians could get nowhere near a studio, and it was cheap and cheerful to be able to sort of hawk your talent and have a disc and say, I've recorded, this is what I sound like. And until you got to that stage, you were making these kind of recordings. And famously, lots of groups that are so well known today, their very first recordings are on these kind of discs. Famously, there's a Beatles one. Their first disc is in a little studio.
Wow, I didn't know that. So maybe that up in Liverpool somewhere? They went into a store like Lewis's or something, or...
Absolutely. They went into a small recording studio that offered them, you know, you could, for a 10 bob, you could make a record. Right. And it was a one of one. You only had one, you know, so you weren't making a run of discs. And I think that is the beauty of all of these records, is that they are one in an edition of one.
It's the Elvis thing as well, isn't it?
And Elvis, exactly. Elvis did the same as well. It was the beginning. It was the start. It was the kernel of what was going to become a kind of recording career for some, and for others, it was the only record they ever made.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I bet that's worth a bit then. That one-off record, Beatles record, isn't it?
How can you put a price on it?
You couldn't put a price on it, right?
And I'm sure someone may have done, but who knows what these things are worth. And certainly these recordings are highly prized, certainly in the States. And when I researched the series looking at the global reach of these records and spoke to American collectors, some of the big blues collectors pay heavy money for these very early recordings, because these are very special. These are raw. You know, if you want blues really dirty and real, you aren't going to get more real than these kind of authentic recordings in very, very primitive recording studios.
One of the things about the X-Ray Audio project, one of the sort of themes of it, if you like, which seems to really appeal to people, particularly live, is just this, in fact, that it's a story about a time, just in the way you're talking about, when recordings were one-offs. Everyone's different, but also precious. And at this time in the Soviet Union, if you were listening to the Beatles as they were at the end of the X-Ray period, sound quality didn't matter. I mean, some of those records sound absolutely awful, right? But it was something precious about them because you couldn't get it. You know, it was super rare. And I think one of the themes that we found with this project is that it's a sort of contrast to now, where recording and distribution is infinite. You can get anything, and for no cost, you don't have to pay for it, but it can be reproduced infinitely. And of course, these records, some of the beauty or the value of them, isn't it, is that they are one-offs.
You're absolutely right. I think that they're revered for that reason. And of course, just like a 35mm camera, when you're looking at your 24 or 36 film, and that you can't just go on photographing in the old days because you didn't have enough film, so every shot counted. And of course we live in a culture where it's just ad infinitum, so there is something very special about that decisive moment, the moment of that snap, the moment of that recording. Obviously on the other side, and what happens as well is that these are also part of a kind of throwaway culture as well. And the reason why some of them just end up, and we find a lot of these records on eBay today, being sold off, is because they were dumped. People didn't see the value in them as well. We see the value. And for example, when four guys went out on the drink and recorded a disc at 1 a.m. at the end of a pier or something, and one of them takes it home, listens to it, and thinks, okay, I don't want to remember that, and that ends up being dumped. And somehow we discover these discs. Obviously, they're valuable to us, but they weren't valuable to them at the time. And I suppose that is interesting as well. Is that what is valuable in the future is not valuable in the present, and I think that is something that. Why these records and people like us, I think, have become so interested is because there was just literally a blotting out of history.
I'm glad you mentioned End of the Pier, because I'm going to play another one of yours recorded in Brighton.
Hello, Bert. Just a word for you from Brighton. I'm only here for the day, I thought you'd just like a message before I came back. I wonder what you've been doing all day. I haven't had time to sing you anything, but I just thought I'd like to make you a record. I wish you could answer me back. It's lovely here today. I've had a fine time, sat in the deck chair all day. Been up and had tea, finished. Now we're just going back to the Charabanc. We should get home about 9, 9:30. I wonder what you'll say to me when I come indoors. The arrow's going round on the top of the microphone where I'm speaking from, and it's nearly up to the stop red light thing, and then I shall have to say goodbye, old dear. It's right up to the arrow, and that's all you'll hear.
The Brighton connection is interesting, of course, because famously in Brighton Rock, the movie with Richard Attenborough, the execrable Pinky, the gangster, makes a voice record, doesn't he?
Most probably the most famous moment for these kind of records. It was the moment where a film that is oft remembered and is still a wonderful classic after so many years. And, he does indeed. He records a disc, and obviously he has a very particular role to play in the film. And those who haven't seen the film do see it, and I won't spoil it for you.
So that's people going, on holiday is a perfect way. It's a souvenir thing. And I want to play another one of yours from a bit further afield.
Hello, everybody. I'm at the top of the Empire State Building in New York. The Empire State Building is the highest in the world. It is 1,250 feet high and has 102 stories. I can see the whole of New York spread out below me. The towering skyscrapers look comparatively small, and the huge hotels and public buildings are far below. In the distance I can see the Statue of Liberty, the Woolworth Building, the Rockefeller Center, and the quays where the Queen Mary and other Atlantic liners dock. New York is a very interesting city. Matilda told such dreadful lies it made one gasp and stretch one's eyes. Her aunt, who from her earliest youth had kept a strict regard for truth, attempted to believe Matilda. The effort very nearly killed her, and would have done so had not she discovered this infirmity.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because a bit like Paul was saying earlier, it sounds quite scripted. The first bit almost sounds as though she was using the machine in the Empire State, but reading from a pamphlet or something.
Yes.
And then she goes into this rather lovely sort of rendition of a poem in a sort of radio voice, doesn't she? There.
Totally, and I think it's so true about this relationship with the sort of technology, people describing what they're doing, but also the fact that they needed a prompt to help them speak to a microphone. And in fact, in the very early years of these voice records, and this was a disc that was this recorded at the top of the Empire State, and the Empire State had one of these recording booths pretty much from the opening of the Empire State Building. So it was a big thing. When you got to the top, you could make a record, and in the envelope where you got the record, when you got the envelope, you had a little bit of script. So it told you the height of the tower, the distance from various buildings, what you could see from the position of the recording booth. So you were given that information, so you would become a little bit of an expert. You're also promoting the tower itself there, and which was very important. But certainly that's so true, all of these prompts. And in fact, when voice records first started, one of the things they did is they offered a little leaflet that came in the machine, and you could pick one out, which actually told you what to say. So it in fact didn't even you didn't even have to make up your own story or even tell your own, present whatever you wanted to say. You actually were given that information. So it would say, hello, I'm so-and-so, I'm doing this, how are you today? It would be really nice to see you very soon. And all that kind of information so you just read it out. And of course, some people binned it, discarded it, and didn't do that. But it shows how people felt that they needed that kind of prompt, or the company felt that how would you break through people's nervousness and reticence to talk into a microphone?
Now, you mentioned America before, and of course they had their own huge culture of this stuff there, and
yes,
with the blues musicians. But another big thing in America and here, of course, was the use in the war, wasn't it? And I'm going to play another one from your collection here.
How do you do, Miss Otis Kistner of Wheeler, Wisconsin? This is Paul Haggerty, the Gem Blade reporter, and I'm speaking to you from Fort Benning in Georgia. We're very happy now with the best wishes of Gem Blades and Razors to send you this recording made by your brother, Sergeant W.J. Kistner.
Hello, sis. I happen to remember that you have a birthday coming up, so I thought I'd better give you a little remembrance. Each time as the year rolls by, take this record out and play it and think of me. Wishing you a very happy birthday, your brother Wendell.
Well, thank you very much, Sergeant. Let me just add my good wishes on your birthday, too, Miss Kistner. And also that we all can help Uncle Sam now if we buy defense stamps and bonds. Goodbye.
Right. I mean, Alan, to explain what's going on there, because there's quite a lot. I mean, there's an advertisement in there at the beginning, and there's somebody introducing and finishing it off.
These were booths that were erected throughout the US by Gem razor blades, and also Pepsi Cola did it as well. And the idea was that you could record a message. You would go into the booth, record a message. Obviously, it was promoting those products. You would have a recordist with you. So when the record was made, that host would actually be also recording that disc, significantly to make sure that you weren't saying anything about what you were doing in the war effort, what kind of training you had, or anything like that. They were very simple messages to loved ones back home. But the important thing was they were morale boosters, because that disc could sadly be the last time someone may have heard their husband or their father. But also significantly, for those people that were away from home, could be away from home for a very long time, the voice was there for them to listen to over and over again. These discs are very beautiful as well. They're lovely objects, and I think that's something, going back to the work you've been doing researching the X-ray bones discs, is that they're amazing objects to look at. Obviously, the beauty of these discs is that they weren't only the audio, it was also the presentation. They came in a very attractive envelope. The discs were what we call picture discs, so the image on the disc would have been the photographs of the kind of booths that you could make the recording, and on the other side an image of for example, a drawing of a Pepsi Cola bottle and something like that. So it was actually they were attractive objects in their own right. So they became something that you would want to treasure, unlike possibly the throwaway things that we would also talk about as well. They were special, treasured objects, and particularly because of that voice.
So we're going to hear another one. This is Voice of the Forces. You're absolutely right. It comes in this beautiful envelope. It's organised by Army Welfare. NAFI, I'm not sure what that is. NAAFI.
That was the NAFI were places where you would go for your social events.
Right.
So that was sort of a place away from the battlefield.
Hello, darling. This is Bill speaking. I have been with you in 2 or 3 forms, in thoughts, in letters, and in dreams. And now something very different. My voice is with you. This is Monday, the 27th of August, and my second day of leave in Jerusalem. My last away from you and home. Although the release scheme is still an uncertainty, I still have my hopes of being at Christmas for good. In the meantime, I have other hopes, that is, of being with you on a short leave, and so break the monotony of these years of parting. Be ready for me, kick out the ladder, and roll in the barrel. Won't be long now. God bless you. I love you. Keep smiling. All will be well soon. Give my love to all at home. Yours for always, Bill.
God, it's so poignant. You don't know, of course, whether he came home.
Yeah.
What's wonderful about that one in particular is that he's very intimate, isn't it? He's talking about "You're in my dreams." He's forgetting all the radio voice stuff. He's forgetting the fact that he's in a booth and somebody's listening in, Sergeant Major, whatever. He's just coming straight from the heart.
And that is very special, and that's why that one is a particular rarity, because obviously not everyone did that. And so some of the people couldn't forget the fact they were in a studio and talking like we are now. But also, you do get, and not so much in the Voice of the Forces, but some of the previous ones, the extraneous sounds. And I find that also very interesting.
It did sound like a foghorn in the back of one of the previous ones, which is it creates another picture in your head, doesn't it?
Exactly. They somehow capture some of the end of the pier ones. You do get a sense of the bigger picture, the world they're in. And one of the things I was very fortunate to be able to do when I first started recording and collecting these recordings was to meet people, the children and the descendants of the people that recorded, so they could give me a bigger picture about the speaker, tell me a little bit about their lives.
And what it was like to receive these discs. They could tell you that, could they? Because that must have been very special as well, wasn't it? Your response to dropping it on the gramophone or the record player and hearing the voice of your loved one coming across the world.
Yeah, totally. And I think it still is. And I think that, however kind of